Hello everyone, and welcome
Hello.
to yet another video cast / podcast. Today's going to be a little bit of conversation, but a lot of relaxation and movement for pregnancy and birth with our guests. I'm Jeanette, the owner of Babies in Common, and I'm looking forward to something calming today, where our conversations are usually very dramatic, I guess is the word I used earlier today. So this will be a little bit different speed for everybody. And over to Melissa.
Hello, everybody. I'm Melissa Ann Dubois, and we have another excellent episode for you all today. As Jeanette said, it's going to be a little bit different, and we encourage anybody who's watching live or on recording to practice the moves along with our two very special guests. I have a little special guest in here myself right now. My daughter Marcy is joining us, but she is fast asleep. First, as always, just a little disclaimer that anything Jeanette or I or our guests say during this conversation is not to be taken as medical advice. Please consult your own qualified healthcare professional for questions about you or your baby's health. Also, any opinions expressed during this conversation are personal to the hosts, guests, and participants and do not ever represent the views or policies of any current or former employer, including hospitals and clinicians. Our conversations are HIPAA compliant, and for a full review of our disclaimer, please visit babiesincommon.com/disclaimer. So back to you, Jeanette.
All right, thanks. All right, so today's April 22nd, 2020, and today our topic is movement and mindfulness for pregnancy and birth. Our special guests are I can't believe I just didn't say your name correctly. You're one of my very besties, Chere Jalali and Bec Conant. I've known both of them forever and ever and ever. And Chere's an experienced childbirth educator. She's also the childbirth ed department coordinator of a local community hospital. She's also a HypnoBirthing instructor, a yoga teacher, and a group fitness instructor through what is wrong with my mouth today? Through Chere Jalali Mind, Body, Birth, and Yoga. And Bec is the founder of Births, an online prenatal yoga program, and has been teaching yoga classes since 2001. She holds certifications in restorative yoga and her specialty pre and postnatal yoga. She's also certified as a hypnobirthing instructor, a base certified childbirth educator, and spinning babies certified parent educator. She's also a semi-retired birth doula, having attended nearly 300 births. So thank you guys for joining us today and being willing to give some of your time and knowledge to everybody out there in internet land.
Yes, thank you so much. And Chere, you had mentioned that you wanted to start us off today with a relaxation. Would you mind doing that for us now?
Sounds good to me. So it's a grounding practice, just a way of dropping in at the beginning of any class or gathering. I like to even do them when I'm having a staff meeting. So make yourself comfortable. Do whatever little wiggles need to happen to settle down. And then once you've found your way of being comfortable, take all the time in the world to do it. But once you've settled, if after time you realize that you're not super comfortable anymore, please just go ahead and switch your position to accommodate wherever you feel any dis-ease or discomfort. Once your body feels supported and comfortable, if you're not driving or using sharp knives or doing something that requires sight, if you can take out that sense, if you can allow the eyes to come to a gentle close. Or another option, if closing doesn't feel comfortable to you right now, is to allow the eyes to just fall on a certain point and let the gaze stay there on that point and let the gaze soften so that it's hazy and unfocused. The eyes bring in so much information that when you take that away, you might notice the mind wants to jibber jabber or make up for what's missing. That's all right. Let it just kind of spin around, kind of like when you come home or come over to someone's house and their dog jumps around a bunch. Just let it kind of simmer. And now that the eyes are comfortable and the body is comfortable, bring your awareness to your breath. And just notice where you notice your breath the most, knowing that there's no right or wrong. There's just your breath happening here and now. Think of words that you would use to describe the breath. Is it fast? Is it slow? Is it deep? Is it shallow? Does it feel smooth or ragged? Those are just observational words without judgment. And even if you notice that you're judging your breath, like my breath is so stupid, that's okay. Don't judge the judgment. Just notice what's happening right here, right now. And notice how each in-breath is like a smoothing of velvet. And with each out-breath, you can sink down into your foundation just a little bit more. In-breath, smoothing the nervous system. And the out-breath, softening and sinking. And now, gently, 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 just like you would pick up a brand new, teeny tiny, fresh baby, bring your awareness to what's happening in your mind. And then approach what you notice with the same kindness, the same gentleness, the same loving and tender approach you would with a brand new teeny tiny baby. Just notice what's happening in the mind. And without getting involved in anything that you notice, if there's any story or ongoing narration, take a moment and notice how there's a noticer and there's the storyteller. So there's the part of the mind that wants to say a bunch of things, and then there's the part of the mind that can notice the things. And gently bring that noticing part back to the breath. Back to the physical body. And then back to noticing the mind. And then allow that noticer to notice somewhere even a little deeper towards the core essence of your being, this place of knowing, your intuition, your core values, your gut instinct. When you settle, sometimes you're able to notice what is true. And as you settle just a little bit more, beyond there, maybe you can tap into this place at your deep core, the essence of joy, bliss, perfection. It's fleeting. It's fleeting, and that's the practice. Together, let's take one big belly breath in. Open the mouth and sigh it out. And my invitation to you, to each of you, is to, throughout the rest of our podcast time and hopefully maybe forevermore, you just take a moment to check in. Make yourself comfortable. And just take yourself through the series of noticing. On your next inhale, let the eyes flutter open. Again, a little looking around. Yeah. And then we just proceed from here. What'd you think?
That was awesome. Thank you. You called that a grounding exercise, which I think is nice because sometimes we have to ground ourselves.
Especially,
Yeah, Bec might.
what's that?
I was going to say, Bec might recognize this as a traveling through, the subtle body of a complete being, the koshas and yogic philosophy. But, it doesn't matter. You don't even have to get super heady about it. It's just dipping in. Go ahead.
When you say dipping in, what do you mean by that?
Well, what was your experience? What happened for you with that?
Well, you get quiet. Or do you mean like as you're trying to guide, that you're dipping into the center of your thought?
For me, and with practice, I go beyond the thought into a sense of knowing. And so it's really helpful for me. Like every yoga class that I start, I'll do a grounding. In my childbirth classes and even my mind, body, birth, comfort classes, we'll do a grounding. It might not be so in depth. If people are just showing up for a prepared childbirth class, I'd be like, whoa, this lady's way too weird for me. But it's helpful for me to notice what's happening in my body, what's present in my body, what's happening in my nervous system, what's happening in my mind. And then once that settles and comes into alignment, you can tune in to what's your gut telling you, what are you sensing from, here we go, you ready? What are you picking up from the vibration in the room? What are you noticing from around you?
And if I can add in there, Chere, you mentioned the word of sort of what is present for you. And Jeanette, I think the dipping in part is, for me, this practice often brings a feeling of dropping into a sense of awareness of initially my immediate sense perceptions and the immediate just feeling tone of what it feels like to be in my own skin right now. And a lot of times, because we can get so caught up in our own internal storylines and the sort of shoulds, woulds, coulds that we have going on in the back of our mind, a lot of times we don't pay attention to that moment by moment immediate experience, which is, as Chere just sort of touched on, this idea that your deeper instinct, this sense of what we call in yoga, your sort of gut feeling, that gut mind body that tells you from a very visceral level, this is where I want to be, this is what I want to do, this is what feels good to me right now. If we're caught up in thinking mind, it's very difficult to actually listen to the teacher of mine calls it the belly brain from that. And if we can get quiet, and that doesn't mean that the mind is quiet, it means that we've kind of stepped away from following every train of thought long enough to sit at the metaphorical station and listen to what the gut is telling us. And sometimes it'll give you a real clear instinct of saying, I want to do this. I want a cup of hot chocolate right now. I want something that would just feel nice and feel supportive. And in my experience, very, very rarely does that gut ever steer you wrong from that.
You've mentioned the word practice, both of you, several times. And from my very limited understanding of mindfulness and these types of activities, it does require practice. It's something that I try to practice because I learned about mindfulness during therapy sessions and struggling with different anxieties. Can you speak a little bit about specifically to pregnant people that are preparing for a labor and birth and postpartum experience, how mindfulness can help them or why it's important for them to consider practicing?
Yes. Chere, do you want to step in, or shall I go first on this one?
I'm happy to take a little stab at it. So let me say it back to you, Melissa, what I heard. What I heard from your question sounded to me like a big, tall order to really do something and do it a lot. Like that word practice sometimes sounds really intimidating, so I just want to talk about that at first. It's, and then you also said the word try. And I don't know if you heard yourself say it. So here we are, HypnoBirthing instructors are like Yoda, and there's no try, there's just do, okay? And so over time, hi Amanda, I see your smile, you beauty. Over time, if you sit the way we just did with that little check-in, that dipping in, that listening, that finding what works for you to be able to access your deep core of knowing, your place of knowing, it becomes easier and easier and easier, and it's just the process of doing. So when we talk about the practice, it just means coming back and just keep coming back and just keep doing and just keep doing and just keep doing. And there is no perfection, and there's never any cessation of the mind stuff, because that would be irreversible. Like the brain would be dead. It doesn't ever stop. But there's the learning to not get involved with it and chase the threads or pull on the threads or get all wrapped up in what the mind is doing. There's that observer part of you that can be like, oh, bless you, you little sweetheart, look what you're doing. Okay, but here, I'm just going to keep tuning in. So by practice, it doesn't have to be a big prescriptive situation and super serious and I'm going to wear something special and do something special. It's just, you just keep coming back. You just keep coming back to noticing and doing. Because I feel like if we were to say like, I'm going to establish a practice, that it can really feel intimidating. And I'm the person that will be like, fuck that, I'm not doing it. Too much commitment.
Chere,
you go.
Chere, I'm so glad you mentioned what I think is one of the biggest misunderstandings about mindfulness and meditation in general, is this idea that you're supposed to quiet your mind. Please, anybody tell me if you have ever managed to actually quiet your mind by force, ever. As someone who has been studying and teaching meditation now for, oh God, a good 20 years, I can tell you, it's a fool's errand. It's not going to stop. And I think a lot of people will shy away from the idea of a practice of meditation because you get this feeling of you're supposed to, like you said, Chere, you're supposed to achieve something. The person I originally learned meditation from used to talk about it as a way of getting to know your mind a little bit better. And not even just knowing it, but maybe even getting to be friendly with it a little bit more. So that we have these patterns of thoughts, these ways of interacting with the world that we're not always paying attention to, and which have then colored how we've responded to things and maybe have started to become part of our own internal self-talk. And I know if your self-talk is anything like mine, I am my own worst critic. I am absolutely much harder on myself than I would ever be on a yoga student or another meditation student or another mom or another human being. And so my experience with practice is it really is this quality of simply observing. And I always like the definition of mindfulness that Jon Kabat-Zinn gives. He's a writer and a researcher. He's the one who started the mindfulness-based stress reduction program at UMass Amherst. He describes it as mindfulness is the moment-by-moment observation of what is changing without judgment around it. And I just think that's just such a simple way of thinking about it. It's not sitting in lotus, good Lord, no. It's not wearing monk's robes. It's not chanting Om for 1,000 hours. It's not even sitting for any extended period of time. The style of mindfulness that I practice, actually, there are many, many, many people who do it sitting in classic Western chairs, feet on the floor, no crossed legs whatsoever. The eyes aren't even closed. We leave them open because, you know, we want to be, ultimately, we'd like to be able to relax while driving the car. And then we just simply acknowledge when we sit down and I say, oh, look, I have a very, very busy mind today. My mind is going nuts. Isn't that interesting? And that same teacher said it was like making friends with yourself. He said, you have to imagine it's as if you discovered there's a squirrel on your shoulder. And the squirrel is just yammering at you. And it's just going, and normally you haven't been paying any attention to it. And there's been a squirrel yammering in your ear this whole time. And all the meditation practice truly is you have a moment of, oh, I hear something. It's like my toddler, I hear something. And then it's as if you just took a moment and you looked to your right and you saw this squirrel on your shoulder. And all you did is you simply went, ah, squirrel. And then you went back and the squirrel keeps yammering on, but at least now you've gone, squirrel. And you came back and it's just, you're becoming familiar and customized to this squirrel mind that we have going on and on in the background. And then every now and then you have one of those glorious meditations where you sit down and the squirrel is asleep. And those are lovely, and everybody tries to get back to them and they can't because the squirrel's awake at that time. But it's just this process, and what I think is so great, Melissa, to bring it back around to what you were saying of why should somebody think about practicing mindfulness during pregnancy? Well, during pregnancy, there's an awful lot going on. We could just talk physical changes that are going on and we'd have a huge list. Then let's not even get into the mental changes that are going on. And we haven't even opened the door to society and all of the other things that are coming in, the perceptions, the ideas about what it means to be a mother and what your transitions are and what your particular circumstances are around the way you're planning to birth or who's going to be with you, all the questions that we come up with. These are like, you've got more squirrels. Just the squirrels have now got friends sitting around them. And if we don't spend any time being mindful, then the cacophony can overwhelm any ability to listen to that deep gut instinct that says, I think what I need is this. And that can be anything. I tell my students there's no one right way to birth except for the one that's right for you on the day that this particular baby arrives. So it doesn't matter if your friend had this incredible HypnoBirth in the tidal pool with dolphins swimming around her and whatever. Let's go all the way left there for a second. If for you to feel safe is a hospital setting with a doctor who you trust and an epidural readily available, then that is a better birth for you. And if that means that mindfulness then needs to come over into the postpartum experience with breastfeeding and the sleep challenges that we can deal with, it's all one long continuum that we can work with. So
Jody,
that's the idea.
Jody, what's your question?
Oh, she's muted, I think.
sorry, I didn't have a question. I thought thumbs up was like encouraging you.
All right.
I thought the clap was a question.
Oh, sorry. I was taking any emoji as a question, but so, well, I have a question because everything that you said, I love the squirrel analogy, and I love that you guys just reiterated how important it is to know that this isn't something prescriptive, that you have to have all of these things in order to do and achieve, that it can be little moments throughout the day that you check in with your squirrel self.
Literally 1 minute.
Right.
Sit down, set a timer, 1 minute, just feel your breathing. Just feel it. You don't have to change it. You don't have to do anything fancy with it. Just feel it. And when you suddenly realize that you're listening to the squirrel, come back. And if you have time, drop in, like Chere was saying, bring it down through what does your body physically feel like. But 1 minute is enough time.
Can you give us some, like, as a pregnant person who's trying to go throughout their day with all of these squirrels on their shoulder, can you give some real life examples for somebody about how they could insert minutes of mindfulness throughout their day? And I know there's a million ways that they could do that, but just because, you know, some people feel like, well, I just don't have the time. When would I do it? How would I do it? Could you give us a couple examples of maybe even ways that you inserted minutes of mindfulness when you were pregnant?
Yeah, Chere, you had one.
Chere, what's your favorite?
So here's what I give to my students, because I even have a reaction. My squirrel gets busy when I hear somebody tell me to do something for a minute, because if you take like a high intensity interval, high class thing, you know, I'll do it and I'm like, oh my God, I tell everybody they can do a contraction for a minute, but that minute of high intensity exercise kills me. So I'm like, okay, if I have an aversion to somebody even setting a minute for me, because I can easily be like, I don't even have a minute. So instead, I project that onto everybody else who comes to my classes and think they might be like me. And I say, just give yourself 5 breaths. And once your breaths get long enough, that it'll be over a minute that you'll be sitting, noticing your breaths. But even in the beginning, what if they're just like 5 little choppy breaths? Cool. Because I feel like with my students, if I set the bar too high, they're not going to do it. If, you know, I just project that they're like me. It could be an awful projection to put on them, but I'm just giving it little, like give yourself 5 breaths. Just notice 5 breaths. If you're walking, count 5 steps. Feel what your feet feel like when they're touching the floor. Count 5 stairs along a stairway if you're going up or down. Just give yourself, I don't know, for some reason I stick with 5 fingers or something. And eventually you'll notice, wasn't so hard. You could start over again or you could keep going. What do you got, Bec?
Well, my other favorite one is a practice. I honestly steal it from Thich Nhat Hanh. Red lights. You're driving along, you come to a red light. You have to stop. You've stopped. Feel your breathing. Feel your hands on the steering wheel. Drop into just immediate sense perceptions. You know, it doesn't have to be a minute. Really, the minute is simply to give a chance that in that minute, one time, you might have a flash moment of really just seeing what's right in front of you. So I had a long commute when I was pregnant, and I would have all these times that I would be coming to red lights, and I would just stop and I would look and I would just try to truly see the car that was right in front of me. Just really see it for a second, and then it would go. And I'd keep going. And it's almost like you need to pepper your day with this to start just creating a slightly different habit from the habit we have of just letting the squirrel run us all over the place. From it. So that's the simplest way. If you can have time to get to a yoga class or something that's guided, those are certainly lovely, but not everybody can take the time to do it. And there are certainly online resources for people looking to learn meditation or have somebody who's a little more holding their hand to go through it, because it can also be kind of daunting to try to do it yourself. It's something that I really do think is important to do in community sometimes, so that you have the support of another person there saying, yeah, man, my mind is going crazy today. How's yours? Mine has to be worse than yours. And it's funny, meditation circles can sort of almost, you can get into this sort of, how's your meditation? Oh, I haven't meditated in forever. I haven't done anything.
Well, that actually is a good segue into the other part of our video cast today, which is mindfulness and movement. And you mentioned a prenatal yoga class. I have been teaching in Cambridge for about 9 years, and a lot of my students would talk about prenatal yoga classes, the Cambridge area. And I had always thought that prenatal yoga was just your instructor giving you modifications to just standard yoga poses because you have a pregnant body. Much like, when you're doing a step class, they say, if you want to modify this down a little bit, you don't have to do the jump, but what from what my students have told me over the past several years is it's much more than that. So can you talk a little bit about what prenatal yoga is and how that can benefit a pregnant person and preparing for labor and birth?
Yeah, it's thinking about sort of what this was, and yeah, I think there is that misconception. It's not just you, Melissa. There are yoga teachers who think that that's what prenatal yoga is, and prenatal yoga, if it's a true prenatal yoga class, it is so much more holistic in its approach than just modifying a shape of the body to accommodate a larger belly. That's one aspect of changing the practice, but I usually call prenatal yoga classes secret childbirth education classes, because I'm at least throwing out little tidbits throughout. I know all of my teacher trainees learn that they should be throwing in little tidbits of this position can be good for this. And if you're moving in this way, it's doing this to your pelvis, and feel what that's doing. So people get a tactile experience around it. And it gives us, yoga can get very focused on kind of honing your body in a particular way, or sort of working towards kind of transcending the body. And I think that prenatal yoga really kind of goes the other way. We drop down into this physical experience, and then from there start building into this transitional time that we're going through as women into mothers. And what does this mean? And sort of learning that internal awareness and that sense of your own self, of who is this person who's doing this on this mat with another person with you. From that, that's kind of my feeling, that the difference between prenatal yoga and yoga adapted for pregnancy. Because you can teach a yoga class that is safe for a pregnant body, but that doesn't make it a prenatal yoga class. A prenatal yoga class has to look at the fact that you are prenatal, that at some point you're going to transition into mom, and in fact you have already done so. And how are you working with that experience from that? That's sort of my feeling. Chere, how do you conceive of it?
Well, I really feel that any yoga class, the role of any yoga class, whether it's for prenatal or someone with limited mobility who's old, or a fit, ripped 25-year-old, or a mom and baby yoga class, is really about the person who has come to class experiencing themselves in their body. So an embodied experience, really feeling what your body feels like doing whatever it is doing, and not because I said to do it, or if I did say to do it and you're doing it, how does it feel? So I really want the ownership to, I really want that person in that body to feel that experience. So yes, they could get balanced. Yes, they could get stronger along the way, but hopefully in feeling that experience, whether, whichever type of yoga class it is, because I also teach yoga for recovery, it is one where you take your power back and you experience ownership of your own being. And so you see how for birth, right? For birth, how that's so important. So sorry, I had to get in there for that one.
It's a great description.
I agree. And one thing I didn't even know they had until I read your website, Beck, was postnatal yoga.
Oh, yeah.
Now, can you talk a little bit about how that practice meets the needs of post-birth people?
Yeah, and I will say, I'll talk quickly because that could be a whole nother podcast. But postnatal yoga, so when I'm teaching it, there's sort of two aims in it. One is address the common aches and pains that women show up with from having been carrying, feeding, diapering, nurturing a baby. That takes a toll on your physical body, and a lot of us aren't paying attention to our posture all that often. Jeanette, I seem to recall you telling me to drop my shoulders when I was breastfeeding Chere, because I had them up around my ears half the time. And so I see these women come in, and their upper back is completely locked up, and the hips are totally locked up, and the deep core is disintegrated. It's not connected into the rest of the body yet. And so there are other muscles that are taking over and trying to hold and support, which is good for them. Otherwise we couldn't stand up, but it means that the back is compressed, that the posterior core, the back side is working too much, the front side's not working enough. And so I'm trying to bring things sort of back into a state of semi-balance so that people feel a little better. But then the other side of it is it's a practice that's acknowledging and recognizing that you can't just jump back into a regular level 1 yoga class postnatal. 6 weeks out from having a baby, the teacher who teaches the beginner's class isn't going to know that your body still carries the relaxin from the pregnancy forward, particularly if you're breastfeeding that child. And so your body is slightly hypermobile. There are certain places that we need to hold back and build up more strength. And then there are places that we need to actually release and open because they're bearing too much weight from that. So I really, really wish that that it was more known around in this country that people should probably go to postnatal yoga at least for the first couple of weeks to get a sense of what's their body capable of before they try to jump back into yoga, which has things like planks and lunges and back bends and ab work that isn't appropriate yet for someone whose body's gone through that massive transition from pregnancy into postpartum from that part. And then of course there's always the nice part that if it's postpartum, you have a bunch of new moms who all get it. And I at least teach, my postnatal classes are all titled Baby and Me. So the idea is bring your child and we do what we can. And we acknowledge, I say that your yoga practice is maybe 20% asana, meaning yoga physical postures, what we see in the magazines. And the other 80% of it is what I call the feeding baby asana. And the changing diaper meditation that you're doing, the walking around, bouncing vinyasa that everybody's doing. And yes, exactly, just like that. And thinking of this in terms of bringing that mindfulness piece, bringing it into the rest of your day. So it's not just, I practice yoga when I do downward facing dog, which is once in the week? How many hours of the day do we hold our babies? How many hours of the day are we feeding our babies? That's the posture I want them to, quote unquote, master.
That's amazing. I feel like I need that even 9 months out, as I'm holding, people who are listening can't see, I'm holding my baby in a baby carrier, which I have to do 75% of her waking hours, because that's, you know, the way I can soothe her the best, keep her close and meet her needs, but also get anything done, because I have 2 other little kids. So finding ways to be mindful of my mind and my body, doing the everyday things I have to do as a parent sounds awesome. Like, sign me up.
Come on over. They're virtual now. You could totally come.
That's right. That's right.
I love how you said it was 20-80, which is Pareto's principle. And the only reason I remember that is because I recently had someone on a podcast that I was listening to reminding me of it, about how a lot of things in life are an 80-20 balance. They're not really a 50-50 balance. So absolutely. So speaking of positions and 80-20 and asanas, Chere, is there anything you can share about positions or movements that you would encourage pregnant people to get into, or laboring people?
So here's what I would do for every single person who has a body, and especially somebody who's got a baby growing inside their body, and it's a standing sort of sequence, and then I'll pass it over to Bec, because we'll see what she wants to add on from here. So if you want, you want to come to a stand, try it out with me, or, you know, if you want to try it another time, that's fine too. But this is something that I do like all the time. So it's just getting like, you know, kind of like line of scrimmage sort of stance, where like, I taught a senior yoga the other day, and my mom was in class, and I was like, Mom, I know you're a hoverer. And I don't know if she appreciated it. I had her on mute. So, so dropping the hips like you're just hovering, and then tucking. So I'll even let you see my pregnant looking belly. You know, just tucking, taking the navel point in, and it doesn't matter how much the belly really moves. What matters is that you begin to round that lower back, and then letting the tailbone, your spiritual tail, just rises up again, and then you bring it down towards the floor, tucking. So you're really just doing pelvic tilt. Another thing would be to think as if your pelvis was a punch bowl, and you wanted to pour the punch forward, get an anterior tilt to the pelvis, right? And then lift it back up, quit pouring out the punch. So just a little bit of pelvic tilting back and forth, and then really taking it into a round and articulating. I can't quit staring at myself. Whoa. Articulating. I just look at myself as much as I can. It's weird. It's not even like I like what I see, that I do it. And then push the chest forward, get those shoulders in, tucking and rounding. So we get a lot of forward of our shoulders, but it still feels so good. So this is how our day is spent most of the time. It still just feels good. And then you can notice the difference of how an active back is when you draw the wing bones together and expand the chest forward. And then, you know, eventually come up to standing, take a big like commercial, like you're in a commercial, lift the chest, you know, and get that big stretch across here that counteracts that forward slump that we do so much. And then over to you, Bec. What do you think? What do you want to add on there?
Oh God, yeah, that's absolutely so yummy. Just get that backward opening. Let's see if I can see in camera and frame here.
I know, Jeanette, I noticed you didn't get up.
I don't have a lot of room.
I should have. I really should have, because my hips are so stiff. So yeah, exactly what Chere was just doing. This kind of mobilizing and getting your pelvis able to swing and shift. And I will often also have students take it into almost a big hip circle, just kind of moving your way around so that the joints get going. But what I found is that they actually feel, it feels fabulous and wonderful to do it standing. You can sometimes get more actual spinal movement and awareness if we're coming onto hands and knees. So what I'll usually have people do is when they're standing, I have them back their hips up. So no more tucking, please. Then we back the hips up, drop the pubic bone down so that we're standing into our legs. And then I just really have them reach the arms up so they get nice and long. We bend the knees, we come down to Chere's nice, what did you call it, Chere? The linebacker stance?
Brimage.
Like line of
Stance,
scrimmage,
there we
line
go.
of scrimmage.
We do a little bit of movement here, but then you can walk your hands forward, come down onto the knees. And here, you're able to get a real kind of circling, swirling movement in your pelvis, just in what the yoga calls table pose, hands and knees. If the wrists are sensitive, I usually will have students drop down onto elbows and just kind of give a little bit of a circle and a roll. But this is one of those places that I love to encourage people to, as you were saying in the beginning, Chere, getting into that idea of what feels good to your body right now, what's actually feeling right. And I give people license that even if they want to come forward and do a little bit of a back bend and then come back, I don't want them to hang out there because we don't want to overstretch your abdominal muscles. But it can feel so yummy to let the front of the thighs open a little bit. And then they'll usually sit all the way back. And of course, you have to separate the knees wide enough so the belly's got space to be there. You know, don't squish the baby, obviously. But coming back, and then we usually take that into this kind of rolling wave through your spine. Just kind of inhaling forward up to hands and knees and exhale, moving it back. And I've been told by a lot of students, and as a doula, I definitely saw this, that this was something that moms would start doing just instinctively.
I'm thinking that as a labor and delivery nurse right now, the things that I'm watching you do are things that women, when left alone and are not tethered to anything, will do with their bodies. And can you talk a little bit about why that is? What's happening inside of our bodies when we're moving in these ways? Can you explain?
Yes. I mean, and you know this as a nurse, my nurse knows this as a spinning babies practitioner as well, but when we're in labor, it's not just that the uterus contracts and kind of, it's not toothpaste out of the toothpaste tube. It's not squeezed, the baby just kind of squirts out from that.
I wish though.
Sometimes
I really
wish.
Nice. It would be so much easier from that. But it's much more this idea of the key fitting into the lock, this kind of rotation movement. You know, even when you open your front door, you don't stick in the key and push and the door opens. You have to stick in the key. You have to turn it. If it's a cold day, maybe you have to jiggle it a little bit. You have to wiggle. And so when I'm shifting and swirling and rocking and rolling on my hands and knees, and I will also have students sometimes will swing one leg forward and will come up into sort of a modified lunge, or they can take their leg out to the side and do more of kind of a side lunge. What I'm doing is I'm actually changing the internal dimensions of my pelvis. I'm actually moving and stretching and opening connective tissue that is around the pathway through which baby's head has to spiral. And I mean, we could wax poetical here about cardinal movements and how the body has to open, the baby has to rotate, they're supposed to be flexing their head. But if mom is just still the whole time, then it's all on baby to do all the rotations and movements. And to be fair, the poor little person has no idea which way is up right now because they didn't know there was a thing called up. As far as they knew, they went where gravity told them to go and where there was enough space for their body to settle. And so when I teach prenatal yoga classes, I'm looking for sort of this balance in the body. I'm trying to relieve the tense points that our women are telling me they have because they have ache in their back or tension in their front belly or their thighs are stiff or their hips are tight. But that's also telling me where their body is holding on that we want to release to get back to a nice open space so that they can then listen to what their body is telling them to do, and they can trust that instinct to shift and move and guide them through it in that way. So it's this idea of it is mom and baby working together to bring this new being and this new soul out into the world and into mom's arms from that.
And even back to the word practice or do, when people do these activities more often in pregnancy, you're going to more instinctively feel what's comfortable to you in pregnancy, but also you'll do that in labor. You'll just naturally get into those positions, which are super, super helpful. And they're not typically the positions that most care providers in most places that people birth are going to suggest to you. But tapping into your intuition and your memory and your muscle memory and your body of like, this is what felt good to me 3 days ago when I did this move when I wasn't in labor, and going, no, this is what I'm going to do now. And sort of tapping back into what Chere was talking about of dropping in to your center and just saying, okay, give me 5 breaths where I can get into this position and do what I need to do, so that you're not paying attention to all the other things that people are asking of you when you're in labor surrounded by other people too. It's really a great combination.
And the other interesting side of it can also be that, given that some yoga postures can be a bit uncomfortable, there can be some sensations of opening and stretching or muscles working. But in a yoga practice, we generally will take, maybe not 5 breaths, but we will take a good couple of breaths to breathe with it and allow ourselves to experience that sensation. It gives your mind a little more stamina when it starts to come up against unfamiliar sensations like labor, which you might, and I'm not saying that this is for sure, but you might be more willing to investigate those sensations and sort of explore them and play with them instead of tense up. And we know that tension creates more tension, and it doesn't serve us well. So the more we are able to sit with discomfort long enough to realize that, oh, it feels better if I move in this way, then that gives us some instincts to then follow later on from that.
Perfect.
Chere, you had your hand, you had a thought there.
Yeah, I forgot what the thought was, but I sort of want to I just want to make a connection to that, that the more you build your confidence, whether it's on the mat or on the pavement or whatever it is, the more you believe in your body, the more you're going to believe in your ability to get that baby out. And in my experience, I remember I had a question for you all. In my experience, and it's very limited compared to the company I'm with here, in supporting women in labor, they're not like, oh yeah, I'm going to bust out this yoga move because it widens my hip and creates space for baby to spiral through, right? They're just, whoa, here's my body, and here's this sensation, and I'm just going to move with it to try to lessen my experience of that sensation or go wherever I can go. And so, I think it's that trusting my body is leading me in this way, and I trust to go with it. And then the other thing that that was my first question, was to see if that has been your all's experience, because that's certainly what I've noticed. And
Yes,
then
the
link I wanted to make was also through showing up and showing up and showing up and knowing that if let's say you're a weightlifter, I like to put another plate on the bar and get it a little higher, get a little bit of extra weight lifted. I like to go a little further on my run. I like to ride my bike farther, swim farther. I like to hold a pose longer. And all of those things, you feel them happening in your body, right? You don't do an athletic pursuit without noticing how it feels in your body. And it doesn't always feel like puppies and rainbows. Frankly, like the opposite. Like oftentimes your lungs are burning, your toenail falls off, you shit your pants at mile 13, but you just keep going, right? Because whatever. And okay, I'm having these sensations, but I'm not suffering, right? So you don't need to be saved from them. You don't need to be rescued. You're just going to keep going. And I've never run a marathon or pooped my pants. So that's just what I hear happens.
I have run a marathon, and yes, you don't need to be saved. The only difficulty with marathon and the labor analogy is that at least with the marathon, you knew when it was going to start, you knew exactly how long it was going to be, and you were able to slow down if you needed to. So
and practice the route. You knew the route.
The route over and over and over again.
And there are people alongside the route cheering you on all the time, which is why we need to have a doula with us and supportive birth partner of some sort and a team of other providers that are all there to root you on.
Yeah, I agree. And another thing to add to that, if those of you that are watching the video, Bec was swaying and moving in a very primal way, letting her body do what she needed to do. And that's one of the reasons why you need to and we talk about this in childbirth class, nurture the psyche. You need to set the mood. You need to be in a place with people around you that you feel relaxed and uninhibited, right? If you don't feel like you can move in those ways in front of your mom or your sister or your best friend, then they're not the best people to be on your support team when you're in labor. You need to feel like you can listen to your body. Our bodies are very smart in labor. And one concrete example I can give is if the baby is facing the opposite way, for example, if the baby is facing towards the front of mom's body instead of the spine, the hard back of the baby's head can really push into the sacrum and tailbone and cause the birthing person a lot of pain and discomfort. Jeanette is holding up on her video right now a baby, what we call OP, occiput posterior. And when especially a mom is unmedicated and she feels that back pain and discomfort, her instinct or that person's instinct is to get off of their back because that relieves much of the discomfort. I'm not saying it can, relieve all of the discomfort, but the instinct of people who have a baby in that position is not to lay flat on a hospital bed. So, Bec said it so perfectly. Labor works best when birthing person and baby are both active participants and able to listen to what their body is saying. So that's not to say that if an epidural is part of your plan, that can't be an excellent tool in your toolbox. But if you do take a childbirth class, you will learn other tools that you can use before that epidural that will help you listen to your body and get into positions that help you and your baby work together to achieve a more functional, more comfortable labor experience.
And I know, Melissa, I mean, all of us who've attended births, we've seen people who have epidurals who still can get on their hands and knees.
Oh, absolutely. Yes. And that's another thing that you can learn in many childbirth classes is even with an epidural, what labor or pushing positions can you still do? How can we use a yoga ball or a peanut ball to help position your body in different ways to help you open different parts of your body?
While you're sleeping, if you are sleeping.
Absolutely. While you're sleeping, while you're awake, the ways Bec was moving when she was on her hands and knees, when she was rocking forward and backwards, side to side, and doing hip circles, that was all opening her pelvis 360 degrees, right? And so we can't do everything with an epidural. Once you get an epidural, there's no longer getting in a bathtub, for example. That ship has sailed. But there's certainly do not have to be flat on your back. And, filling up that toolbox before labor with hands-on practice with a childbirth class that talks not just about what to expect on labor and delivery, but how to fill up your labor toolbox is important.
And the other part of that, Melissa, is if you've had the chance in a childbirth class or a yoga class or just on your own to get in your body and move and feel, you may have an internal sense of, when I move this way, this opens this part of my pelvis. And when I move this way, this opens this part of my pelvis. And the key to moving and why it's so effective in labor and why that kind of 360 opening is important is you've got to open where the baby is in your pelvis. I always tell my yoga students, squatting is said to be this lovely, fabulous birthing position that opens the pelvis, but if the baby is up on the top of your pelvis and hasn't entered into, my pelvic model, hasn't entered into the pelvic, what's called pelvic brim, but the top side of the pelvis, you can squat till the cows come home and it's not going to help because the baby isn't down there yet. So we've got to do something like a pelvic tuck, like a back bend, something. And even that part of trusting your body, sometimes the instinct your body is giving you is not what conventional wisdom would usually say is what you quote unquote should be doing. I remember a mom I was with who, she had a posterior baby, but it didn't present as a posterior baby. She didn't feel back pain. She felt front pain. She felt a lot of front pain. And her instincts, she said later, she didn't tell me this during labor, but she said later her instincts were that she wanted to go backwards over the bed. She wanted to lay back and let her legs hang. She said, because my hip flexors were going absolutely insane, and what I would normally have done would have been to do wheel. She's a massive long-time yogi. And I looked at her and I said, well, that would have opened the top of your pelvis, which made sense because that was what we were ultimately trying to do, was to open the top to get things to back bend. And then we could have opened the middle and the bottom to get things to open from that. So it was this gut instinct that she had to trust something that was totally counter to what every medical professional was telling her. They were saying, get on your hands and knees and everything will be fine. And she said, yeah, but no, I want to lay back. And for some reason, laying back for her worked for that period of time. And then she got off her back.
Listening
Bec,
to the birthing person is important. Yes, absolutely.
Bec, didn't you tell me, or did you have a picture on a social media or something one time of one of your doula clients doing a full inversion? Wasn't that you?
I have a picture of
like a handstand.
One of my doula clients she was doing forearm stand, feet against a wall, and she's an advanced yogi, so this is not something I recommend regular people go ahead and try. But yeah, that was 4 hours before she went into labor, into active labor. She was probably in early labor at the time. And she said it felt fabulous.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. There's also some videos of people who are postpartum who are up in a handstand and their child comes up to them and starts to nurse in that position, which is fun.
Mm-hmm.
Those pictures crack me up. Another thing that you mentioned that I'd like you to talk a little bit about is you mentioned the spinning babies word. For those that are listening or watching that haven't visited spinningbabies.com, it's a fantastic website with a number of excellent resources to help you learn. Gail Tully, the founder, talks about we're not trying to spin any babies manually. We're trying to soften the way to allow the baby to utilize all the space of the pelvis to get into the best positions for birth. But I know that you and Jeanette, for Babies in Common, are teachers of a Spinning Babies parent class. Can either of you talk a little bit about what people learn in those classes and how it might be different than a prenatal yoga class or a regular childbirth class? Because that people may say, oh, I'm already taking the childbirth class. Why would I need that?
So in my experience, the Spinning Babies parent class covers specifically how to open specific levels of your pelvis and how to release connective tissue in sort of staggered ways in your body so that you restore that balance as much as we're able to. And then we talk specifically about how do you open certain levels during labor. It's a very cohesive and very pared down, straightforward way of thinking about the birth process. So it's not complicated. And a lot of times the amount of information that you can get about, oh, this position's this way and this position's this way, it can be a little overwhelming. So what I really like about it, and I encourage every single pregnant woman, I think, should take this class because it's such a simple way of clarifying when do you want to be tucking? When do you want to be lunging? When do you want to be squatting and opening? And how could you tell that?
The other thing that it does is it talks about earlier in pregnancy, if you could start around 20 weeks, is what positions can you be in, what positions should you avoid, or what movements that you're doing in your everyday life should you tweak a little bit so that your pelvis is working well together with the ligaments that hold the uterus. And the uterus is this muscle that's ever growing, and it can actually be twisted or leaning or flopped in a certain direction, and that makes less room for the baby to get in its optimal position for not only your comfort in pregnancy, but also for getting ready for birth. And so it's fascinating how we just don't think before, if you're a typical person who doesn't know a lot about the internal anatomy, we think bones, baby come through bones. And that's actually really the typical childbirth educator paradigm in a way that I was taught for a long time. And yeah, the uterus is a muscle and it squeezes down and it squeezes in and it lifts up and opens the cervix. But there's so much more going on there with the intense number and interplay of the ligaments and muscles that are also attaching to parts of the uterus and parts of the pelvis, and how those are affecting the shape of the uterus, and how that helps you or how can influence how uncomfortable you are at any part of your day in pregnancy or repetitively for weeks in pregnancy. And yoga can help with this too. But sometimes you could do all the yoga in the world you want, but if no one told you to do X, Y, or Z, that is a daily activity type thing from spinning babies, you may consistently have that still problem, and you can go to every chiropractor, and that's a wonderful thing. And I totally encourage people to go to a well-trained prenatal chiropractor. But it's fascinating how there's this new shift of thinking and knowledge that puts everything together. I sometimes though do worry that people who are pregnant are like, okay, wait, so I have to go to prenatal yoga, I have to do all these daily activities, I have to cook all this organic food and eat lots of vegetables, and then I'm supposed to see my partner and get my work done. It's a lot. And what we're trying to do, I like Bec how you said that, like it's a pared down, simplified way that we're hoping it becomes instinctive, and it's a very short practice, but also when your partner or someone who's with you frequently can be there taking those same lessons at the same time, they can learn to remind you of those things, or watch out and be like, oh, I just saw you got out of the car that way. Remember, you're supposed to keep your legs together as you swing yourself out of the car. Or you just got out of your bed by making your knees be really far apart from each other. How about you put your knees back together and swing out of the bed that way? And very, very simple things people can observe. So.
Although we do warn partners not to tell mom too often how to move her body, because that's a fabulous way to get smacked. But
it's not just about comfort in birth, but comfort throughout your pregnancy too, is what you're saying.
Yeah. When I start my prenatal classes, Chere, I'm sure you do the same thing. We do a check-in. We go around, everybody talks about how are they feeling, what's going on. It's a way for them to let us know what's happening with their pregnancy. But as a yoga teacher, I'm listening for, where are you having pain? Where are you out of balance? Where is there something that I'm hearing going, ooh, we need to do some sacral work with this person. And we need to, I'm going to see if I can work, I'm going to get all the yoga blankets out, and we're going to turn them into rebosos, and we're going to do some actual belly jiggling and bum jiggling, and we're going to see if we can free up all these people that are having round ligament cramping happening because the tissue's too tight. And people think this idea that you get into third trimester of pregnancy and you're destined to have back pain. No, you're not. The posture we stand in can contribute to you having back pain if we can rewind that back. And like Jeanette said, if you can start it at 20 weeks, maybe you balance in second trimester so well you don't actually have pain. I have a lot of students who get to 38 weeks and say, where's this back pain I was supposed to be having?
Well, also the position you're watching TV in. And I worry now that so many people are home so much more. How much more pain are people in now? And yes, there are still chiropractors that are seeing pregnant people, but there's so many positions that I'm guessing people are laying around in because we're not going to work, we're not standing, we're not teaching, we're not walking at work. Or, maybe you are moving around because you've got lots of other children, and that's wonderful, and that's probably going to really, really help you.
I'm seeing a huge surge in rib and upper back pain in my classes because people are sitting slumped at the computer with their head forward.
Yeah.
from that.
So
Alrighty.
to anybody that might be watching or listening, what I would say, and this is a good reminder to my own self, so self, listen, you matter, your comfort matters, taking time for yourself matters in pregnancy. And once you have this baby, you are going to be dedicating a lot of time to this baby. And so while you're pregnant, dedicating some time to yourself so that you feel better mentally, physically, emotionally is going to help you and your baby. Happy mommy, happy daddy, happy baby, right? And there's no excuse now with everything being on Zoom, because I get emails from people often that are like, there's no prenatal yoga classes in my area. Well, now we've got 2 fantastic instructors that are doing them virtually. So definitely worth checking out. As you can actually do it on your lunch break from your stay-at-home job if you're working from home.
I heard a good
exciting.
suggestion. I heard a good suggestion the other day that if you're doing any sort of classes or yoga classes or anything like that, if you can mirror it or stream it to your biggest television, which a lot of us can do, then you can feel a little bit more like they're right there with you, right? So that was something that I thought was a neat idea.
So Bec, you wanted to close us out today with a body scan. Can you tell us a little bit about what that is and then help us get through it?
Yeah. So a body scan is a technique that is found in mindfulness practices. It's found in HypnoBirthing and relaxation practices. It's also found in yoga practices referred to as yoga nidra or yoga sleep. And it's a way of bringing awareness through your whole body, but also getting a real sense of just softening and relaxation throughout from it. You can do it as detailed or as generally as you want to. So what I'm going to take us through is probably about we'll see, it was probably about a 5-minute just easy body scan. So just as we did at the beginning, find a place where you feel comfortable. You can be sitting, you can be leaning back, but make it somewhere that doesn't take too much effort to hold your body. If you feel comfortable closing your eyes, go ahead and close your eyes. If it is not comfortable or it is inconvenient at the moment to close your eyes, then leave them open, but let your gaze be soft, so you're kind of just taking in the whole visual field in front of you and not really focusing in on any one specific spot. Breathing can be whatever regular breathing you are already doing. Whatever I said before, focusing on your breathing. And then in your mind's eye, in your attention, bring your focus to the muscles in and around your face. And just notice if there is any sensation to notice in this area of your face or your jaw. There may be stiffness around the eyes. Perhaps there's some tension in the jaw. Maybe there's a feeling of wetness or dry in your mouth. And you may also notice that there is no particular feeling that comes to mind, in which case just allow yourself to experience not feeling. Experience just resting there. And allowing whatever tension you might feel to fade and drain if you can. And then let your awareness come down from your face into your neck and shoulders. And if you're sitting, perhaps these droop into the frame of your body. And simply notice if there is anything to notice there. If you need to move slightly, you can. But it's also fine to have there be tension and to let it just be there. And then letting the awareness come down into the arms. Simply taking in whatever there is to take in. Upper arm, elbow, forearm, wrist, hand and fingers. Let go of whatever you don't need to be holding on there. Allowing the arms to just be as they are. Let's move the attention to the chest. You might be aware of this, of the simple rise and fall of your chest as you breathe. May be able to feel your heartbeat. Maybe not feeling it. Either way is fine. Extending the awareness down into the belly. The area that we often hold tension where we're not aware of it. That can have a lot of criticism. See if for a moment you can allow yourself to relax the belly. Feeling it rise and fall with the breathing. As we put attention down to the hips. Maybe you feel where you're in contact with your chair, the bed, the floor. Maybe becoming aware now of the thighs. The big, heavy muscles and bones of the legs. Just noticing whatever there may be to notice in this area. Is there stiffness, openness, heat? Continuing down to feeling the knees, the lower leg. Maybe aware of the bend in the knee. Pressure on the calves or the shins. And finally coming down to feeling the ankles and the feet, toes. Ground underneath you. And from the feet, maybe allowing the awareness to expand and take in the whole body. Maybe that also expands to include someone else's body if you are holding someone. And if you are holding someone, what does that contact feel like? What is their breathing? What are the noises they make? Do they smell like?
Mm.
as we take in the full experience of just being with ourselves, with this body, possibly with this baby. And maybe staying aware of all of those sense perceptions. Coming back into the room. When you're ready, opening your eyes again. I had to bring Marcy into it because she's just too cute.
She appreciates it. And I have to say, one of my favorite times to practice mindfulness is when I'm holding her on my chest and she's asleep. Because like you said, smelling her hair or her milky breath or listening to the little sounds she makes. Yeah. So that can be a way for a new parent to practice mindfulness. It's pretty fun when you slow down and listen to all the little things about them.
Mm-hmm.
I was also thinking you could do that if you're pregnant, because you're carrying another person and holding another person in a different way.
Oh, yeah.
Wow. Well,
There's a whole class in the HypnoBirthing series dedicated to prenatal bonding. So yeah, there's a lot of that tuning in to that little so-and-so inside. Mm-hmm.
Mm. Awesome. Well, thank you. So we should wrap up, and thank you. That was surprising to me, actually. It was, I experienced it differently, and some of the things you said I had never heard before. So I hope others will experience that as well. Jody's got to go. Thanks. Bye, Jody. All right. So thank you, Chere and Bec. And
thank you so much. This was wonderful.
Yeah, really a nice, different than our other ones. But so there are, Chere and Bec have websites, and can you guys say what they are? We'll put them on the internet as well. But
mine is ChereJalali.com.
Perfect.
And mine is omebirths.com.
Yep. Awesome. People can go there. I know you're both doing classes on Zoom, so people can drop in, so to speak, and learn about those and get that accomplished. Accomplish is the wrong word. Enjoy them, experience them, feel them. Awesome. So I hope others will enjoy this one and other video casts and podcasts that we do. We have other topics coming up, and I'm going to send it over to Melissa now.
Yes, we hope that you'll join us again on Monday. We have a great conversation with a postpartum doula about surviving your postpartum quarantine and how to set yourself up for success. And of course, as always, if you learned even one tiny little nugget of information that was helpful for you today, please don't be stingy and share it with a friend who's expecting or is a new parent. If you want to laugh your stretch pants off while learning about pregnancy, breastfeeding, childbirth, please consider taking a live Zoom class with us at Babies in Common. And virtual lactation consult and support groups are also available. If you like us on Facebook, Babies in Common on Facebook, we're always posting great articles, videos, and resources to help you rock your birth and thrive as a new parent. We hope you'll join us, and we are a community for you. After all, we all have babies in common. Take care, everyone. Have a great night.
Thank you, guys. Good night.